2020 and ending November 19th, 2023. We also have a correction for Affordable Housing Review Committee from October 2nd, 2020 Municipal Board Committee meeting. We are correcting Richard Osteen's appointment to a 3-year term beginning February 18th, 2019 and ending February 17th, 2022. For the Historic Preservation Board, we have a recommendation from Matthew Lyons to reappoint Len Dennis to an additional 3-year term beginning November 7th, 2020 and ending November 6th, 2023. And to appoint Christopher Olson to a 3-year term beginning November 7th, 2020 and ending November 6th, 2023. I could accept all of those recommendations together collectively for a motion to approve, or we could take them one by one.
I'll move to approve all 3 collectively.
Okay, and I think the mayor is not with volume, so can I second that, Palmer?
Sure.
Okay, I'll second that. Any commentary or discussion on these recommendations? Hearing none.
Oh, sorry. I think
okay.
I'm excited to see Ms. Dennis reappointed, especially after her retirement at Florida Southern. I think she'll be really helpful in that capacity.
Great. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor of these recommendations, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the mayor's back and the recommendations pass. Hooray. And as usual, we just want to encourage everyone who is interested in getting involved in the City of Lakeland to go on our website and look into the different boards and committees that have open positions available. After the Lift Lakeland last night, we certainly want to have a lot of diversity and people from all parts of our city getting engaged, and this is a great way. So we do have one member in the area of labor who is actively engaged in affordable home building that could participate on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee right now. We also have the Code Enforcement Board is looking for one member to be an alternate, must live inside the city limits, and someone for the Zoning Board of Adjustment and Appeals could look up that application as well. So we welcome everyone to apply and to get involved in the city on our boards and committees. And that is all, unless we have any other business from the committee. Hearing none, we call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Is it possible you can hear me at all?
I hear you.
Your volume is very low, Mr. Mayor.
Volume is low? Well, I have no clue what happened on the mic side today. Is it so low, sir?
I can't hear Bill talking.
Okay.
Commissioner Franklin.
That's okay. I called the meeting for the Real Estate and Transportation Committee's meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Commissioner Franklin and myself are here, as well as Mayor Montz, staff, and Sarah McCauley. With that, we have 2 orders of business. I see Palmer Davis is here. He'll be presenting the first one, which is a purchase and sale with Lakeland Fields Motorcar for Lakeland Park Drive Connecting Project.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is, I believe, the last parcel that we need for the Lakeland Park Connector project to connect from the Fields dealership over to Carpenter's Way. This is for the negotiated purchase with the property owner of a little over 2 acres, peaceable title of some Fields property, as well as several parcels for temporary construction easements. We are using under this contract, the city's appraisers values for the property. The land has a value of $449,300. We also have had to take some of the physical improvements to Phil's property, which our appraiser assessed at $107,200. Taking off from the purchase price is some property that we're going to vacate. There's a cul-de-sac at the Fields dealership that we're going to be able to vacate because of the realignment, and so we will dedicate that back to the property owner, and that will come off of the purchase price. So the bottom line, for the value of the improvements taken, less what we're donating back to the property owner, and then paying for the property owner's consultant fees and attorney's fees, we're going to purchase the property for $542,505. And then there's also a cure plan for impacts to the remaining property of the property owner, and the city is going to actually construct that cure plan with our own forces. It's estimated that's going to cost $222,000. Greg James is on in the meeting, I see, and he can give you more details about what's going on the ground out there.
Good morning. As Palmer stated, we've reached a value for the land, temporary construction easements, and there's some surplus right-of-way that when we complete the project, the north third of the cul-de-sac is no longer required for our road right-of-way. And so we're going to, for $28,300, dedicate that back to Fields. There is a cure plan, and anytime you're dealing with a piece of property, whether it's residential or commercial, if there's any impacts to improvements that are on the property, we have to take a look, how can we make that property owner whole? In this instance, we're impacting two parking lots that Fields owns. One is the parking lot adjacent to their service area on the footprint of the dealership itself. It's going to require removal of some asphalt, relocation and replacement of some fencing, some gates. There's an additional gate that will be added, and then coating and restriping the parking lot in order to obtain at least the same number of parking spaces they have. They will have as it was equal to what they had in the before. The second parking lot that's impacted is the parking lot on the north side of the cul-de-sac, which is used for employees and inventory parking. And here again, we're impacting some parking lot lighting. The land that we're taking reduces their parking spaces, as well as we're having to relocate fencing. So the plan incorporates some additional asphalt, some remarking, and we end up with actually 4 more spaces after we're done than they had before the project. And so we're proposing to do that with city forces so that, one, we can control the timeline. One thing that's very difficult with construction projects is having a road contractor out there and a private contractor doing something else. And so this way we can control that timeline and not create any delays either to Fields or to our road contractor. And with that, I'm open to answer any questions you might have.
Scott, do you have any questions? I can't hear you, but I see the shaking his head. Again, we looked at the map. The color map is pretty good there, so it gives me a little bit of better understanding of what's going on. By the way, Commissioner McLeod is arrived also, so I want to make sure he gets notice he's here.
Can you hear me?
Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Franklin made a motion to approve. I second it. All those in favor, raise your hand. Scott, thank you. It passes unanimously. Our second order of business is for acquisition by the Lakeland Chamber of Commerce on Northwest Lemon Street, Main Street East, and Ohio Avenue, as well as Sykes Boulevard. Palmer, will you be addressing that one as well?
I'll introduce that, and we have some visuals on the screen as well. You've all heard about this. This is a property, as you can see from that map, that's just north and a little bit to the east of the RP Funding Center. And the Chamber of Commerce is interested in relocating their facilities to that location and constructing a 15,000 square foot business resource center on the property. Under the terms of this deal, the city would sell the property to the Chamber for a purchase price of $270,000. The Chamber will provide a deposit in the amount of $25,000. That would go hard at the end of the inspection period. If the transaction closes, that $25,000 would then be applied to the purchase price. The Chamber will have a 365-day inspection period to examine the property to determine whether it's suitable for their purposes. That's in their sole discretion. They can extend that inspection period by 2 90-day extensions. To exercise that second 90-day extension, they would have to deposit another $10,000 deposit. That would once again go hard and would be applied to the purchase price, provided the transaction closes. This is going to be this contract is structured similar to the framework deal, the Meriton deal, where as a condition of closing, the Chamber will have to get all of their permits and development approvals in place, as well as have financing in place. And once all that is in place, then the transaction will close and the city will convey title to the Chamber. At that point, under this agreement, the Chamber has 30 days to begin construction of the project. The closing is to occur within 12 months of the effective date of this contract, with 3 30-day extensions at the Chamber's discretion at no cost to the Chamber. As far as development incentives go, the city will provide development incentives up to a cap of $645,000. Included in this would be the city acting to demolish all above or below grade structures on the property, relocation of the overhead electric lines on the property in order to facilitate the project. The city would provide utility upgrades, including water, wastewater, broadband fiber, and some streetscape and sidewalk improvements. And then we would also pay or otherwise satisfy building permit fees, impact fees, and other type of development related expenses. Once again, up to a cap of $645,000. Similar again to both the framework and the summit deal, the city commission would have ultimate final approval authority over the building elevations, exterior materials and color schemes for the structure that's going onto the property. Operationally, has agreed to provide space to the city and the CRA for some different education and awareness seminars for a total of 12 per year. And also, the Chamber has agreed that they will provide free or reduced rates for minority women. So that is the basic terms of the deal. And I know we have some members of community development that have worked on this on the line, as well as representatives of the Chamber, if you have any questions.
Do we have, Nicole, do we have a site plan by chance? Is that too premature?
No, sir, we don't have a site plan as yet. What they hired Strong Trout Architects to be their design professional on this site. And I know they've done some conceptual layout, but no, we don't have a site plan to share right now.
Thank you. Do I hear any questions from the committee? Commissioner Walker, I'm glad you arrived. Your question, sir.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to make sure I know, in addition to what we have been shared in this particular agreement with them having, allowing us to use a facility or the use of the facility, as mentioned by Mr. Palmer just now, X number of times in the course of a year. Now, the things that they normally have done for years in the relationship we have with the Chamber, with those things will continue. Am I saying that correct?
Yes, sir. Those all the programs that the Chamber has already provided in partnership with the city will continue as normal. What this agreement is codifying is an additional 12 or opportunity for us to do additional outreach and education seminars and that the city would have access to the facility at no cost. So this is above and beyond already what we do with the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, and I know the scope of it. I think of what some of that may be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cole, and thank you for that answer, is to make sure that we can have and collaborate with other particular entities, especially when it comes to small business and small business development situations. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so the Chamber is looking to have 8 to 12 tenants, if you will, but they're going to be all organizations that support small businesses. They would already be located in this facility. The kind of programs that we're looking at, this came up at the CFDC meeting that City Manager Sharaus just presented on. There was a question about, can our purchasing department conduct more training classes as far as minority businesses participating in the procurement process of the city. These are things that we do now. We talked about increasing that participation, and this would be a location that we can do that. We've also talked about sharing incentives and homeowner programs in partnership with our CRA and what's available to the community. And so we'll just be increasing those types of educational opportunities in this location.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So again, I'm excited to see a project happen over there. They're kind of taking a little step in pioneering the areas, as well as the Sykes property to the north. This may give a little bit of foothold in the area. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Sorry, Bill, you're not on our committee. You have to wait. So I see a motion by Commissioner Franklin, a second by Commissioner Walker. All those approved, please raise your hand. That's a unanimous decision there. With that, there's no more order of business today. Thank you, and I will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Well, it is 8:35. We can begin our agenda study if you can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, good. So that was a half an hour of trying to get both speakers and Mike to work together. I apologize for that and appreciate the committee meeting going forward. All right, so if we look at our agenda study and we see we start at 3 o'clock on Monday, and our presentation is going to be one from Julie Townsend on what's up in terms of going downtown, report from the LDDA, then a commemorative flyover picture presentation that will be made by the Lakeland Aero Club, which is an exciting group of young men and women who are working diligently and even building their own plane currently that they're going to eventually fly and putting in every rivet. Then we'll do our beautification awards with Connie Haynes on both residential and commercial. And if Connie can't come, I'm sure Bill will be there as well, who is celebrating his 50th year of employment with us as a city. There are no proclamations at this meeting. We'll do the committee reports, and that brings us to the consent agenda, which are the minutes as well as item and utility C, number 8, C1. And so if we could get a report on that, that would be great on item C1.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The item that we have is a replacement of the liquid fuel flow divider for McIntosh, for MGT2. This is what we have also referred to as the Calpine unit. This is an agreement with Roper Pump Company. As the startup of MGT2 was taking place, it was discovered that the existing fuel flow divider had some corrosion and wear, and there was a need to replace it. And due to the long lead time of trying to order a new part, which takes approximately 12 to 16 weeks, staff actually contacted OUC, which was able to provide a brand new part so we could get that unit started in June of 2020, and that was successful. It was determined that rather than once we ordered the part, rather than taking it out and refurbishing it and returning it to OUC, that we should just go ahead, order a new part to replace the part that OUC gave us. The total cost of the purchase is $55,991. It is a sole source purchase from this particular company, and this is also included in Lakeland Electric's FY21 budget.
Questions on that at all? I don't know, we have any alternatives really on this one, do we?
Well, no, I mean, OUC gave us the fuel flow divider, so now we need to replace what we have taken from OUC. So that's the reason.
Ramona, is this something, are we going to save the old one and have it, is it something that needs to go out on a consistent basis? Are we going to refurbish the other one? Are we going to just, are we trade in? What's the, do we know what we're going to do with the old one?
David Holdner is on the line. I don't know if we took the one that wasn't, it might have been beyond being repaired, but it could have been refurbished possibly. I'm not sure, but David Holdner can answer that question. I believe he's on the line.
Thank you, Ramona. Yeah, the one, Commissioner Reed, the one that we pulled out from our machine was in such disrepair. To repair it and overhaul it was just outrageous in cost, and we would have been better off to buy a new one. The one that OUC gave us is in service and working properly. We're exercising it. We swapped fuel oil to do that just the day before yesterday, and it's completely in service. There will be a maintenance interval on this, but it'll be years down the path as long as we exercise it and maintain it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions by commissioners? Would you like to leave that then on the consent agenda? Just thumbs up if so. Okay. All right, we've got on consent, and that is it. So beyond consent, we have no requests to appear from the general public. We do have an equalization hearing. Let's do that, lots and cleaning. Anything you want to add?
Nothing really to add to that. That's just routine lots cleaning and clearing for different properties that we've gone out and cut or cleaned. So next item would be public hearing, second reading. We have one ordinance for second reading and potential adoption, and that is an ordinance that will establish pole attachment rates for wireless facilities attaching to our poles. Under this ordinance, city would charge an annual attachment fee of $225 per attachment to a city utility pole, $205 for each annual attachment to a city light pole, and then a one-time $500 fee for any unauthorized attachments that we discover, and then those would then be subject to our regular annual fees thereafter, provided we authorize that originally unauthorized attachment to continue. We've had a lot of discussions since the first reading, including with some stakeholders, and have gotten to understand the various positions that are out there. I think the one issue that seems to be left in question would be the annual attachment fee of $205 for city light poles. And there's a split of opinion really in the state on that issue. What it comes down to is that there is a Florida statute that says that it establishes a rate of $150 for non-exempt poles. On the other hand, there is an FCC ruling that says that it's established what they call safe harbor rates, and anything below that is considered a reasonable charge, and that fee is $270. So we're sort of in between the two. We feel that the better interpretation is that our poles are exempt, and therefore our only requirement is to be under the FCC safe harbor threshold. And furthermore, our $205 per city light pole represents what our actual costs are, and quite frankly is considerably less than what other jurisdictions are charging around the state. So I think we're pretty comfortable with where we stand with this ordinance at this point. Once again, I've had a chance to talk to different stakeholders, and I mean, we may not agree with all of them, but we feel confident in this particular draft of the ordinance.
Any questions or comments, Commissioner Walker, and then Commissioner Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Davis. That was going to be one of my questions, and I think if you can elaborate a little more, and if you could share, because my concern was, what are we looking at with other municipalities, other munis around the state and what they're doing in comparison. And I think I just heard you say that our cost is even below some of those particular municipalities, or am I saying that correct?
That's correct. And I know Cindy Clemens is on the line, and she's done a lot of legwork to look at various different rates around the state. So I'll let her speak up on that one.
All right, thank you.
Good morning. Yes, we are right towards the bottom end of how much everyone is charging. I think you're going to find that the more urban areas like Jacksonville and Orlando are going to have to charge more just because of the density and the work that has to occur to keep their maintenance up. But but basically you're seeing cost, Tallahassee charges $200 because that's their cost. We're charging $225 and $205 because that is our actual cost. There is no, sorry, my phone keeps ringing. There is no profit that we're making off of this. This is pure cost. So I feel very confident that that is what the FCC is expecting, is that we go and we charge what is fair and just recover our costs. And we are doing that. We are following the rules. I've checked with all the munis across the state, even across the nation, and we are in a very safe, fair position. I would even say that I would be proud to share this with the FCC as a model example of a municipal utility in a city working with the providers.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. I have two questions. In reference to your comment recently, should we implement a inflation factor of some sort? Again, I know our costs are going to go up if we're really at hard cost. Can we have like a 2% every so often or something like that, or can we adjust? We can always adjust the fee, I guess. But that's my first question. And the second question is, what is our current income from Spectrum on these poles, and then do we anticipate that going up with this new rate?
Okay, that's the first question. The ordinance does have a CPI escalator built into it, so it will be adjusted on an annual basis based on the CPI. I mean, we have to monitor that because, as I mentioned, there are different rate limits that have been established by different jurisdictions, and so we obviously need to make sure that we don't inadvertently go above those rates using this automatic escalator. But there is a CPI escalator in the ordinance. Second question, last I heard, Spectrum is paying a little over $800,000 for pole attachments. Cindy could probably speak more on that.
Yes, we have. Okay, so I'm looking at the cost from the major companies that are attached with cable, okay, because we don't have any wireless yet, but the cable is roughly around $2 million we collect annually for all the cable attachments. They are literally on every pole. Like, for example, Spectrum has over 40,000 poles that they're attached to. And we have a total of 90,000 poles in our territory. So when you come in with the wireless at $225, they're going to be probably on, it could vary, but an estimate is every third pole. And that charge again is $225, and that we have line itemed that $225 so we can defend it, saying this is how much the pole costs, the maintenance, the taxes, if someone hits it, our crew's labor to go out and fix it, that kind of stuff. So I don't know what we'll be looking at, but I'll be happy once we kind of get into the world of having actual wireless attachments on our poles. I will circle back and be happy to give you a report of what's going on out there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
And Cindy, once they have been attached,
I'm sorry, Mayor, I did not hear you.
I'm sorry. If they have been attached to an example on an existing basis, and then there is an additional attachment to go on wirelessly, is that justifiable to have both charges on the same pole?
Yes, absolutely. I have been doing a lot of diligence on that because I know that we have gotten a concern raised by one of our vendors. We across the state, and even I checked with our contacts that work with the FCC in DC, it is a common practice. It is normal. It is not prohibited to, if you have the same company has both a wire attachment and a wireless attachment on one pole, the same pole, you can charge and should charge the wire attachment fee as well as the wireless attachment fee because they're very separate.
Commissioner McLeod and Commissioner Walker. Commissioner McLeod, then Commissioner Walker, and then Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. And Cindy, you mentioned concerns from vendors. Are there other things that they're concerned about? I'm just curious if our rates are near the bottom of what other municipalities are charging, if we're on solid footing with having both the wireless and the wire fee. Just trying to understand what the pushback is, or if there are other concerns they have with the ordinance.
Okay, I'll try to make this. It gets a little complex just because this whole topic has been going on for about 3 to 4 years. But when the state statute and the FCC started getting involved about 3 to 4 years ago, a lot of the larger urban areas were being approached by the vendors. So they had to go ahead and start cobbling together what we're working on right now. Okay. And so those fees were well over $1,000 per pole. And that's when the providers went to FCC and really started pushing, saying, listen, we can't afford over $1,000 for every pole attachment in the United States. We need you guys to intervene to control that because it's, and so that's when the FCC came in and said, okay, you just have to demonstrate your cost and you can't go higher than 270. So what's happening now is that was being litigated. Well, that was just overturned in August. So right now, you'll see all of our sister utilities across the state are going back to redo all of their agreements. We happen to have waited until after that lawsuit was solved. And we are really, I feel, positioned well. I've said this before. So I feel like, we're kind of post FCC ruling, we're the first one out of the gate with the FCC costs. Okay. Now, I will give kudos to Tallahassee because they went ahead and adopted their agreement, which I based what we're doing off of before the FCC ruling came out. But their agreement is not, it's like a year old. So I think Tallahassee and Lakeland Electric, we're well suited. We're following the current rules of the universe, and everyone else has to come back now and redo it. OUC just finished theirs. They are at 270. But I talked to 2 other municipal utilities, and one of them still has a $1,500 fee. And now they've got to go back and they've got to redo it because they are clearly out of accordance with FCC rules. So does that make sense? Are you following me? Is that okay?
Yes. Yeah, it does. Thank you. And that's helpful. I was just curious if they're, I guess, trying to understand what the pushback is, if it's always going to be just to push for a lower rate from a cost perspective. And I mean, that's understandable from their vantage point, but just wondered if there were other things that they were concerned about with our ordinance.
No, I mean, we even asked the attorney from one of the providers, and we said, do you have an issue with the cost of the light pole, which is $205? And they said, no, it's not really the cost. It's the regulations and the statutes behind the cost. So really what I think there's a lot of things we're running into is more about semantics and the technology. Those are the 2 things that are really driving this. I felt like as long as we are doing what the spirit of what the FCC is wanting and following the rules and being able to demonstrate our costs, we are, like I said, I feel very proud of where we're sitting. I think it's a good place and I think we can defend it. And I don't imagine that outside of the syntax of the law, going back and forth with attorneys on very specific, like you need to say this word and not this word. We are well placed with our agreement and our costs.
Which is partially why you liked to defend it as being underneath the allowable rate.
Yes, agreed. Yes.
Commissioner Walker and then Commissioner Madden.
And I believe, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my answer may have been my question, may have been answered by Ms. Cindy. And I want to make sure, as I think all of us want to make sure if we get involved in litigation, and hearing what Ms. Cindy said and Mr. Davis, I would think we have ourselves covered in regards to a provider such as Spectrum or whoever they want to litigate or get involved with some situations as such. So that was my particular, concern or question that I was going to ask. But I believe, Ms. Cindy, you've answered that to some respect. So thank you.
Commissioner Madden. Commissioner Madden, I think I caught you in Commissioner Madden, you didn't have your earphone in. You are on, ma'am. Commissioner Madden, can you hear me? Commissioner Madden, if you have something to say, could you unmute your phone? I think she's lost signal and can't hear us well, if I'm guessing by what we're observing. But this one last shot. Commissioner Madden, if you can hear us, then you can comment. All right. That makes a case for making sure we have good signal throughout our city. She is our living example. Any other questions for Lakeland Electric on this, Cindy or anyone else? All right, let's move to the next item. Thank you very much for that. That brings us to City Manager. Item A, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. The City Manager's Office has two items on the agenda, both related to bid awards. The first item is regarding a bid award to Specialized Property Services Incorporated for repainting various waterproofing repairs, sealants, and pedestrian coating replacement at the Lakeland Police Department. On July 16, 2020, the City of Lakeland issued a request for bids for repainting various waterproofing repairs, sealants, and pedestrian coating replacements at the Lakeland Police Department. The project includes performing minor repairs, cleaning, priming, and repainting the building and components, as well as pedestrian traffic coating, miscellaneous sealant replacements, and waterproofing repairs. The city's purchasing department received 9 bids. City staff, together with the city's engineering consultant firm, PSI Intertech, reviewed the bids, provided a corresponding letter of recommendation, and confirmed the scope of work complies with the project requirements. Following a notice of intent to award to the lowest responsive bidder, the company withdrew their bid, citing lack of capacity to complete the project. City staff and the engineering consultant then conducted a second evaluation of the next 2 lowest bids submitted, contacted references, and determined Specialized Property Services Incorporated to be the most responsive bidder based on positive references and a scope of work that fulfills all project requirements. Funding for this is provided in the FY21 CIP. It is recommended that the City Commission authorize the award of bid number 0226 to Specialized Property Services Incorporated for repainting various waterproofing repairs, sealants, and pedestrian coating replacements at the Lakeland Police Department, and authorize the appropriate city officials to execute the contract in the amount of $78,247. That completes presentation.
Any questions on that at all? Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. And Sean, I was just wondering, we've talked about local vendors a lot, and I know we have an item coming up on that, but it seems like something like this, I was just surprised we didn't have any local companies in that mix.
Yes, we always do our due diligence in advertising, with all of the local vendors. And as you can see in this list, there were several from the surrounding area in Orlando and and Tampa, and even, Jacksonville and some other areas. But we did not have a local vendor who submitted out of the 9 bids that we did receive.
Yeah, I know we have, and we all saw the email from Chris Ann about small business listening sessions. And I've just heard from, I feel like more businesses recently who have said on different projects, I would have been interested in that, but I didn't even know it was out there. And maybe I know there's a responsibility on the business side as well, but I'd love to look at how do we make sure that that our local companies know about these types of opportunities. I just feel like for this one, there had to be somebody in Lakeland who's qualified who would have been able to do this.
Well, it's also why we have within the purchasing department the seminars and sessions that people can go to on and being educated on how to bid. When does it come up? Where do you look for these things? And so for all of those, that's part of what in Chris Ann's scenario, we should probably, in Bridge, that we should probably emphasize is that process, that it exists, and when it's, make sure that everyone's noticed. To that end, Commissioner McLeod, because it's important that we're doing everything we can to make people aware.
Sure. I think it's confusing for a lot of people. The whole process, it can be overwhelming. If you don't bid on government projects, even if you do, as somebody who does from time to time, it can be daunting, and just knowing that those projects are out there. So I think there's certainly room to improve that. But I mean, I don't have any issues with the bid itself, Sean. That caught my eye. I was looking, did we have a Lakeland company in this mix?
Yes, sir. And we are committed to expanding those training opportunities that everyone's talking about. Even in the item earlier, when we talk about the chamber opportunity, that will be heavily utilized for just exactly that, so that we can have more training opportunities, and not just training opportunities where our local vendors come into us, but where we get it out into the community and meet with them. So we're committed to that, and we'll certainly accomplish that as we move forward.
Mr. Cook.
Just a thought, and this came from Liz Holiday, our social media guru here. She said we could start putting RFPs on social. That way we know our local vendors would definitely see them, if that's something we want to start doing.
It would be a way to have it become very at the tertiary level.
Yeah, especially if there are projects where there's you may not have to put everyone out on social, but if there are things that we're pretty sure we have these types of vendors in our city, and we want to make sure that people and business owners know about them, that would be a way to kind of break outside of that traditional seminars and the way we typically advertise these projects, the RFP services or whatever we typically do. So I could see some value in that for sure, Kevin.
And having done this in my former business life on both a county, city, and state basis, it is daunting. And so having the training is important, because when you start to put in all the factors on a competitive bid, there's so many things you have to think about. And frankly, you're doing it at a level that your margin is going to be lower than normal in order to be even viable in the first place. And then that helps you go through the whole process. Then even if you decide not to bid, it's interesting, this Hialeah bid was withdrawn, for example, after they made it because of capacity. Well, what likely happened is they recalculated costs and went, holy cow, we can't do this, And so that's going to happen from time to time. I don't know that we have very many of those occur, but that's an education process in and of itself. And that's why comparing bids is so important. Any other comments from commissioners on this one? Commissioner McCarley.
I would also just add to Commissioner McLeod's point is that as the newspaper industry wanes, and which is where we publicly notice things and where we RFP things out, that social is really critical to communicating what we're looking for and what we're needing out into the community. Because if you think about it, even just as simple as our first readings and second readings of ordinances and resolutions that have historically, appeared in a newspaper format, no one's reading that anymore, unfortunately. So I think this is a very, very valid point. And I think the more we can use our communications department, always the better.
Some people still do get the paper, but it is a waning group. And that, to your point, Commissioner McCarley, maybe there's even a social in those posts, a link that's everything we do throughout the course of the year on a scheduled basis, so that somebody could even look well in advance about some things that they could be considering. That's a great way. Those are wonderful suggestions.
We can certainly accomplish that, I think, in pretty short order. So we'll have some discussions internally to make that happen. I would also point out, though, that, you know, we do advertise also in a lot of the different trade publications, and many of those are not print either. You know, they're web-based. So, you know, we do have some other platforms included in the way that we advertise, but certainly using all of our communication channels, especially through our social media accounts, is again, something we'll make happen.
Excellent, sir. Your second item.
Okay, second item is regarding a bid award for Enviro Build for HVAC replacement and History and Culture Center interior renovation at the City of Lakeland Public Library. On June 29, 2020, the city's purchasing division issued a request for bids for HVAC replacement and History and Culture Center interior renovation at the City of Lakeland Main Public Library. The project includes HVAC replacement for approximately 34,000 square feet of the main library and related work. It also includes the interior renovation to construct the Lakeland History and Culture Center. Purchasing received 6 bids in response. Due to the current downtimes and as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, city staff, together with the city's architectural firm, STA Architects, requested a revised schedule of values based on a new combination of project phases. The new project phasing plan reduced the project duration by 75 days and generated a savings of $60,328, resulting in a new lowest total bid amount of $1,899,471. City staff, together with the city's architectural firm, reviewed the revised bids. The initial lowest bidder was determined to be non-responsive, but the second lowest bidder, Enviro Build, met all project requirements. So subsequently, a notice of intent to award was issued by City Purchasing to Enviro Build LLC. Funding for this is provided in the FY21 budget. It's recommended that the City Commission authorize the award of the bid to Enviro Build for HVAC replacement and History and Culture Center interior renovation at the City of Lakeland Main Public Library, and authorize the appropriate city officials to execute the contract in the amount mentioned of $1,899,471. That completes staff's presentation, and we do have staff on the line to help field any of the technical questions.
I'll begin with one. Is this a complete repair, provision for the entire library, or is it a unit for a section of the library in which the Historic Culture Center will be in?
I'm going to ask Richard Baker.
Good morning, Richard Baker with Facilities. This is pretty much a revamp or redo of the entire HVAC system, duct work included. So it's about 95% of the HVAC system in the library.
Excellent, because if you're doing it, it's the right way to do it, and do it once and have it be done. So that's excellent. Any other questions, Commissioner Franklin?
Right, and a little more information on why we're doing it is that 90-95% of that system is fiberglass ductboard instead of metal ductboard. It's just over time it's been sealed, it's been cleaned, but we've had some environmental issues, so it's time to take all that out and replace it with new metal duct.
And then also, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, as Richard stated on the HVAC system, that is for the majority portion of the library, but now specifically to the interior renovations for the History and Cultural Center, that's about 3,000 square feet of build out for that interior space.
In addition to, Commissioner Franklin.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I was just looking at that, and it's kind of confusing to me because that's a pretty staggering amount of money to replace HVAC. And I think it would be good just for our own edification and also for the public to break out how much of that is HVAC work that would be done anyway for the sake of the library, which begs another question. Would we be doing this now if not for the center? But I'd also like to see us break out how much of this is actually renovation costs specific to the center so we can actually keep tabs on how much money we're actually spending on this project. Because I don't think when we were talking about doing this for the coming year, we weren't talking about spending $2 million.
Yeah, when we talked about the cultural center, we were talking in the $500,000 range.
Right. Would we have been spending $1.8 million or $1.9 million on HVAC right now in a building that, as far as I know, if I walk in there, there's air conditioning now. So is it really necessary to spend this money right now?
Mr. Brossart.
Yes, sir. This project was budgeted many years ago by facilities maintenance for the library, long before there was ever talk about modifying anything inside the library for the new cultural area. So yes, sir, this was planned long ago by facilities, and we just had to wait to find the monies to be able to do that and hit the sweet spot in timing. So that's Richard had put that on there a good while back.
Commissioner McCarley and then Commissioner Walker.
Didn't we, I don't know who remembers, but I do, back in the early 2000s, we had done a complete renovation of the public library right there, because I know they moved the children's section at least, and then the children's section moved into the cirrhosis building temporarily, and I don't know if that was 05, 06, or when that was. So we didn't do anything then with the HVAC system, and we didn't renovate that, or, we're now, or is it timed out? So we need a new HVAC system. I'm kind of confused because I feel like we spent a great deal of money back then in renovating and doing the whole new children's area. And it may be longer than I remember.
Yeah, Richard Baker again. That project was an addition to the library. So that was an addition of the children's spaces. When we did that back in, I believe that was 2005, 2006, that addition, we did install new HVAC equipment and metal ductwork at that point. This is trying to take care of the other, 90-95% of the library that has the fiberglass ductboard in it. And we have had environmental issues in there with that fiberglass ductboard. It's been sealed. Again, it's been cleaned. We've done everything we can, but it's time to get that ductboard out and get it replaced with a more commercial type metal duct work, similar to what was installed when we did the children's library. So that part of the children's library is not getting redone. That's the piece that's staying.
Thank you.
Excellent memory, and thank you for the question, Commissioner Walker.
Let me share, if I could, and thank you, Mr. Brossart, for your comments, because I think from a historical perspective, you're correct. It had always been shared from the beginning when we talked about the Lakeland History and Cultural Center that we knew this work had to be done, because there was no way we can go in and try to do what's going to be done for the center without having this additional work that already had been planned well before the LHCC conversation came about 3 years ago now, maybe two or 3 years back. So I know this has always been an ongoing subject, at least in part of what I've always been shared, because I guess being having my fingers on the pulse with what is moving forward with the center, I knew about this HVAC situation, and we knew we could not do anything with the center without doing the HVAC situation, which had been planned, as Mr. Brossart indicated, and as well as Mr. Baker has shared. So I'm just sharing with you all, I'm glad to see us moving forward. We're doing what we need to do to make sure it gets done. And I hope you all will stay afloat to make sure you understand why it's being done. So my comments are that I'm glad it's being done. And we're moving forward, we're making sure that we get the center completed in the 380 days that I think I shared with you all in my last comment about the center as it's moving forward with what we're doing. Fundraising has already started. We got money going to GiveWell Foundation for this particular interior design. So we're just moving forward and hoping in another 380 days, after this particular situation is done and move forward construction of the integral parts of the center, we'll have an opening of the center. So thank you very much again.
Thank you for those comments. And there's a health concern on removing that fiberboard as well over time because those particulates degrade, and getting sheet metal back in is good. And I'm sure that's part of what's being addressed. Commissioner Franklin.
Yeah, my comment just goes back to just transparency and clarity about what we're spending. And this has nothing to do with support or lack of support of the project. And I also know that we need to keep up with the maintenance on our facilities. It's just that I think we're combining two different things here. And I think this appropriation needs to clearly break out what is HVAC and what is for the renovation of, or, you know, specifically for the build out of the project. I just think we need to know that so we can keep tabs going forward on what we're spending. That's my only comment.
Commissioner Franklin, we'll have that breakout for you for the City Commission meeting on Monday. We should be able to separate that out, and we can delineate that and report back and even include it as an amendment to the agenda item.
And my comments, Mr. Commissioner Franklin, not to be saying we don't want to move forward. That was not my intent. And I hope you didn't get that from me in my conversation or in my comment. I'm not saying that, sir. I'm just saying we knew this kind of situation would have been planned sometime before, even as it was mentioned by Mr. Brozart about the LHCC project. We knew this beforehand. Now, again, I would agree with you. You know, the cost of the center is one kind of thing, and the cost of doing an HVAC situation to help support what the center going to be in this particular building is another kind of thing. I agree with that, sir.
Commissioner Walker, I appreciate that. I think it's a stop. You're both right. He has no concerns about moving forward with the project either. It's that he just wants the breakout for us. And I think if you provide that, City Manager Strauss, that'd be great. Commissioner McCarley.
Just really quick, and as an addendum to later on, not for discussion right now, if we could have an update, Commissioner Walker or City Manager Strauss, about the center, later on, not right now, maybe in our discussions at another date, if we could have an update. I was just not sure why we're not at Bonnet Springs. I don't know how that worked out, and so why we're back at the library, but I don't need to know now. I don't want to hijack the conversation. I just, for future reference before I forget.
Thank you. Any other input on this topic? All right. Commissioner Madden is obviously having some difficulty technologically today as well. And so I think you'll see her being in and out, and it's primarily not being able to have access. All right. So that's the end of the city manager items, unless you have any other verbals, sir.
I do not. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for taking us back to Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have three ordinances for first reading. The first two are related zoning items for a cell tower in that wooded area just north of Lakeland Christian School. And I believe Teresa or Nicole has a presentation on that. Maybe.
Or Matt, are you doing it? You have
yes, I'll make the presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Kevin can make me presenter.
And Kevin's in the process of doing that. There you go, sir.
Okay. This request is for a cell tower. You've done with a couple of these over the years, so I think you're familiar with how they work, and they tend to be always somewhat controversial. This one's for a change in the zoning from MF12 multifamily to LD limited development, and the conditional use to allow a 150-foot high cell tower. And the property is approximately 10.9 acres located at 1055 Ariana Street. This is the southwest area of Lake Hunter, north of Ariana and east of Sykes Boulevard. And if you drive by there, it's right across from Lakeland Christian School. It's that heavily wooded track there. It is a low-lying area. It's adjacent part of the natural drainage for Lake Hunter. So it obviously has not been developed. even with the current multifamily entitlements. Over the last couple of years, we've had a couple of different groups approaches about doing a cell tower in the area. Apparently, this area it's been identified as having a lack of bandwidth, so there's a strong demand for additional coverage in this area here. And what's being proposed would accommodate, co-locate up to 5 different carriers. So it would be a very efficient use or site for a cell tower if it were approved. The proposed tower would be located in the center of the site on a 90 by 90 foot lease area. So you can see here, this is the lease area right here. And initially they were proposing a monopole tower with the exterior antenna arrays. Later, at the request of staff, they did revise that to a unipole design in which all the antennas would be contained within the tower casing. The site is in proximity to the Dixie Land Historic District, which would be the purple area here to the east. Lake Hunter Terrace, the other one is further south there. But this property is not in the historic district. It is just east of Hardin Sykes Boulevard, which is a FDOT major collector roadway. And the next few slides are some photo simulations that were provided by the applicant, showing how the tower would appear from various locations around the site. The first site is looking northeast from Mariana Street and Hardin Boulevard. And what you see there, that would be the unipole design. This design is intended to be very minimalistic and sort of blend into the horizon, but it would not have any exterior antenna arrays. So the technology is advanced enough where they can actually miniaturize the equipment so that it really appears to be like a flagpole without a flag. And this next slide would be the view looking north from Mariana Street. And this would be the view looking northwest from Mariana Street and Unitah Avenue. And this slide is looking from the Magnolia Point condominiums on Unitah, looking to the west. This is the closest residential use. Their property boundary is about 330 feet east of where the tower would be there. And then the actual condos are probably another 50 feet beyond that. So this is the group that would be most directly impacted. No single family properties nearby. They would be a little bit further east there. And this is the view looking southwest from Lake Hunter Drive and Unitah Avenue. As you can see, the tree canopy and the setbacks, really help as far as minimalizing views. You would not have any view of the actual equipment shelters. That would be the ground-mounted generators and other equipment for each carrier. So those would be set back well away from any roadways. And this is the view looking southwest from Sykes Boulevard and West Highland Street. And the last slide we have is looking east from Sykes Boulevard and South Central Avenue. So this request didn't go before P&Z, actually with the 2 meetings. We did have quite a bit of interest and turnout from the neighborhood and opposition to the request. We've summarized that in the staff report there, but this one is going to, like I say, will be controversial like the others. But I'll stand for any questions you may have here.
Commissioner McCarley first and then Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Matthew. In the P&Z meetings, when you did have neighbors that came to talk about this or listen about what's going on, I've had several emails and phone calls since this is in Southwest and it's close to Lakeland Christian as well, parents who are concerned about anything emanating from the tower. Were you guys able, I have a couple questions, were you guys able to show these renderings to that group, to P&Z, the same pictures you just showed us?
Yes, those were presented there. Most of the concerns we received were either perceived health impacts, which we are not allowed to consider under the 1996 Telecommunications Act, and then just general impacts on property values, compatibility, those types of things there. So we did show these, but most of what we heard was they don't want it in the neighborhood, period, regardless how it's designed, or even if they were maybe reduced in height. Obviously, if reduced in height, it would not be able to co-locate as many carriers, so it would not be as efficient moving forward there. But I think we all know since these regulations were adopted in the late 90s, the technology has continued to advance dramatically, and the demand for, obviously, with smartphones and 5G, it's going to keep growing. I mean, just the fact of life now that everyone has a smartphone. So this area, they have a very small search area that they can find sites in here. We believe this would be the least impactful option, but you'll hear more about that when it goes to actual hearing.
And my follow-up question is there a way to, or are they going to keep that barrier of foliage and trees and everything, and how will they build and have access to the center of that site if it's more wet? I mean, I'm sure that's what their contractor is thinking about, but I'm just looking at the picture you have up right now. I think, all the trees and the foliage around it help it be, less obtrusive and protected. But is that something that we have any purview over, that maintains that, or will they come in and clear cut it?
Yes, if you read the staff report, one of the conditions there, we are going to require them to maintain it as a unified development parcel and maintain that natural canopy as a buffer there. They would have a 25-foot wide access easement from Mariana Street. That would be for vehicular access, probably unpaved, and probably have a gate just to get back there by the technicians to maintain the equipment and all that. But yes, our thoughts, we want that preserved, and the zoning, in effect, the LD will not allow anything else there. So that will ensure going forward that they would not be able to develop anything else on the property as long as that zoning remains in effect.
And sorry, Mayor and Commissioner Walker, one more question. What is this? You had mentioned something about Lake Hunter and this, being tied to that area. Is there anything in there that lakes, is it wet enough that lakes have any involvement with this, or is there any other environmental impact of that area?
We looked at the latest flood maps. But this is the only portion that's actually within flood zone AE. That's the 100-year floodplain. So the latest FEMA map amendment shows most of the areas being up from there, but obviously they've been during heavy periods of rain or hurricanes. It could go beyond there. So I believe the applicant, they are aware of that. I mean, they would obviously prepare an engineer around that for the site, with their pad and they do all that. But based on what we've seen, it appears, it's outside the actual the 100-year floodplain.
Thank you.
And that flow is into Lake Hunter in that particular illustration. Is that correct? Or is that out of? Is that the
I believe it flows out to the southwest.
Okay. Yes, I guess that would be right, because that would be downhill. Yes. Okay. Commissioner Walker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. But I think the questions that Commissioner McCall asked, and thank you, Commissioner McCall. questions, one or two were in my brain, and that were especially after receiving some of the emails that many of us probably received, as Commissioner McCauley indicated, the health risk factor is where I'm picking up a lot of my concerns for my residents or citizens who are in the area. So you addressed that already. So thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. And along similar lines, Matt, if we're not allowed under FCC rules to base a decision on the potential health impacts, I think we've got to be able to explain that pretty well, because I think as we're seeing, residents expect us to take that into consideration. Are there guidelines or, in terms of the distance away from the nearest residential complex, or in this case, a school, that we can point to say this is within standards, or we see other towers that are placed? I mean, it's within that, if that makes sense, because I think that's a hard one for us to just say, well, we can't consider the potential health impacts, because a lot of people understandably expect us to.
Yes, I mean, we use the criteria we have in our land development code, and which recommends a minimum of horizontal distance of 2 feet from any residential properties or right away for every 1 foot in height. So that would meet that requirement. Beyond that, we do not have anything in our code that would really address those other uses. I mean, the code says, in residential, if you have a non-residential use, say church or a school, you could do a cell tower there as a conditional use. I mean, I think you're all familiar. Some churches, they actually lease a part of their site. We have one down on Lake Miriam in Cleveland Heights there that was done probably about 12 years back. It's a popular way for them to get additional revenue. Some of them are disguised in actual steeples. So, again, as far as the health impacts, we can't really speculate what those would be. It's not something we're qualified to consider or allowed to.
Sure, I understand that, but I think we can't just dismiss that outright and expect people to not be concerned about it, or as we're seeing coming to us with those concerns. I would love to know examples of other towers in the city, in their proximity to residential areas, if we can get some of that information. This is the first request of this type that I've had on the commission, so this one's new to me, so just trying to get my hands around it. And certainly understand, where, as I've shared with some residents this week, we want to be mindful of their concerns and do our best to make sure we have the answers to questions and we're exploring the things they bring to us. Have we heard from the school at all? Has Lakeland Christian, I know parents have reached out, but have we heard from staff at the school or leadership?
No, we have not heard from the actual school. And I believe some of you may have read the Ledger article, which quoted some testimony that was presented at the hearing. There was one gentleman who claimed there were 519 cell towers in the city, which is not correct. We actually were working on a map based on the FCC registration of all the built towers, and we'll have that for the next agenda study, which will show you those. But it's probably around maybe 50 or 60 for the whole city, and that would include the unincorporated area.
There are also, Matt, extensive healthcare studies that have been done since cell towers have been put up that are independent, that it might be nice to provide some kind of report either in advance to the commission or at that presentation as part of what we do. Even though it is not the addressable issue to Commissioner McLeod's standpoint, it would be nice for the aggregated evidence to be communicated in that regard.
Yes, we'll see what we can find for the latest research there. I believe the applicant at the hearing, they had presented a report from the American Cancer Society showing no link between the emissions and cancer per se. But we'll see there. We didn't look at that because that's something we were really empowered to do in our review of the application.
Right. So I think Commissioner McLeod is just on a broader communications basis interested in us, even though we recognize that's not a limitation of our consideration, that there is some communication with respect to the concern for citizens, if I understand you correctly, Commissioner McLeod.
That's correct. And I, when we point to an FCC rule and say, well, we can't take that into consideration, but people with an expectation of the commission to protect safety and health, and I just think we have to be able to explain that a little bit more, other than just to say, well, we're not qualified to do that and we can't do that, because I think if that's our position, it's just really hard to defend, and it looks like we're just dismissing people's concerns without giving that weight as we make this decision.
Yes, I understand that, but I think part of it too was obviously this issue pops up in the community where these towers are proposed, and it's something that it's an easy argument to kind of jump on and appeal to, and there's a lot of I would say conspiracy theories, but there's a lot of incorrect information out there about what the actual impacts are too, that can maybe create a sense of fear or hysteria surrounding the actual technology.
And that's absolutely correct. And I've read many of them, so that on both sides. So I have, there's ample evidence of the low radiation from this across our nation. And so that's why I think it would be good to include that material as we go forward. And I see that we have our City Development and Economic Director, Nicole Travis, joining us. I think she may have a comment on this.
Hey, good morning, commissioners. We'll get the other tower locations for you on Monday, and we will make an attempt to collect some information on the medical side for you, understanding that that's not our expertise. I only kiss boo-boos and put Band-Aids on. So, but we'll try to cipher out as much information as we can possibly give you to make an informed decision. But there's some sensitivity around the medical side to that. So we will try to do our best and do some research and provide you with what we think we can appropriately provide you with correct information.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Walker, did you have something to say? I thought I saw another hand. May have been someone else's.
Yeah, you have Bill Reed's hand. I think mine was up before mine, but I'm hearing the dialogue from Ms. Nicole Travis. So thank you for that, because again, in reference to what I heard Commissioner McLeod mention, if we can show there, possibly, I think, as I think drive around Lakeland, as I have personally, just to make sure I saw towers near residential areas, I was trying to make sure that could we capture that kind of a situation. I think that'd be good to know as well.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Matt, I was just thinking, I guess with this tower going and the location is designed, it would render the balance of that property virtually useless. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it would provide obviously a revenue stream to the owners through the leases for each carrier long term, but it would preserve the property. Right now, the current entitlements, someone could come in tomorrow and apply for site plan review for 130 apartment units, and the neighborhood would have no recourse, and they could come in and clear the property and start building once they got their approval. So that's the other side. I don't know what's been fully considered, but this would preserve that natural wooded area southwest of the lake going forward.
Also, did we hear anything from Gene Conrad? I know the proximity is a little bit distant from the airport, but that's a pretty high pole, and I know they'll have to have lighting and stuff like that meets the requirement. But did Gene Conrad make any comments about it?
Yes, we did actually notify him, even though it's outside the notification area, because of the potential changes to the airport master plan to add the new runway there. And Gene did not have any concerns about the proposed tower here.
Yeah, if we're at 150 feet at that on approach to the airport at that location, we're in trouble in the first place. Commissioner Franklin, any comment on that at all from your perspective?
I don't think that's an issue that far away from the airport. But just like any tower, it'll have to be lighted. If it's really more of a helicopter issue than airplanes, but that could be anywhere.
That is our resident commissioner on avionics that we have, the expertise we have to solicit. Any other questions for Mr. Lyons? Thank you. That's good initial discussion. I think it provides great preparation for the commission meeting as well. So appreciate that, Ms. Travis, too. All right, that takes, and your second point is the same issue, is it not, Mr. Davis?
That's correct. One is a rezoning related to the property, and the other is a conditional use to allow the cell tower. But they're both necessary to allow that cell tower at that location.
All right, any questions on the second item? Then we'll go to the third.
All right, the third item relates to a couple of items related to purchasing. The first item is when the charter was amended last fall, the charter amendment removed a threshold that was in the charter specifying that for any purchases above $1,500, the city had to go use a competitive procurement method to complete that purchase. The charter amendment removed the $1,500 and just said that the competitive threshold is just to be established by ordinance or resolution of the city commission. The purchasing department did a survey of various different jurisdictions, and $5,000 is a very typical minimum threshold for the requirement of competitive procurement. I think Tallahassee is actually at 25,000, but most jurisdictions seem to be at 5,000, at least similarly situated jurisdictions. So this specifies that anything under 5,000 does not have to go through that competitive selection process. The second item relates to the local preference that we've been discussing a lot lately. There is just not a lot of guidance on that issue at the state level. However, there is some language in the statutes that makes me believe that we need to do this by an ordinance to put this on the most solid legal footing possible. And so what we're doing is simply putting in ordinance form what the city commission previously landed on as far as preference tiers. I guess as the first matter, the definition of a local business, consistent with the previous commission discussion on this, expands what is considered a local business to the Lakeland Electric Service territory. To qualify, the business has to maintain a physical business location within that territory, conduct business on a regular basis at that location, and for at least the prior 12 months. With big projects, sometimes you'll see, a larger consulting firm establish a local office, but this requires that be a presence for at least 12 previous months. It establishes the four tiers that were discussed previously. First, for purchases under $250,000, there would be if the local business is within 10% of the low bid, they would be entitled to the award of that project. And I should preface that by saying that all of this is conditioned upon the vendor meeting, being a responsive bidder that's otherwise qualified to do the work. The second tier was between $250,000, $500,000. The preference given for that tier is 7.5%. $500,000 to $1 million, the preference would be 5%, and anything exceeding $1 million, the preference would be 2.5% up to a cap of $100,000. For softer type procurement methods such as RFPs and RFQs, of local business would be given 10 additional points for their score. There are some exceptions to this policy. One that you've heard about before is that, if we're using grant funds, those oftentimes will preclude any kind of local preference. That's often the case with some of our larger transportation projects that are using DOT or federal dollars. Doesn't apply to emergency or sole source purchases. And then there's also simply a paragraph providing the commission and out just that, if you make the determination that for any particular procurement that it's not in the city's best interest to grant that preference, you do have that discretion. That's
Commissioner Reed, you begin and I'll have one after you.
Thank you. There again, Phil Walker and I were on the commission when we went over this, and this was a very heated discussion, and we battled this, we beat this thing around a whole lot before we got to this conclusion. And so there again, before we start beating it up again, it's really been under scrutinized for a long, long time. So, and Commissioner Troller was the driving force for a lot of this information. So, there again, I think it's a good order the way we've got it written now, but I'm only one of 7, so thank you.
I appreciate that as well. And of course, we did a workshop on this that was extensive that Mr. Rayford provided. And so I'm grateful for that. What I don't remember clearly is the $5,000, the first part of this. Why 5? Why not 10? And I like the conservativeness of that, but how did we get to the 5,000?
Okay, that was not a part of that workshop. That is being driven by the charter amendment. But Mark Rayford perhaps can speak more on that because he did a survey of different jurisdictions to recommend that $5,000 figure.
Thank you, Palmer, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Allow me to provide input on that. As City Attorney Palmer Davis did allude to, this was actually a change related to the charter, and he's correct. We didn't specifically bring this up in the workshop as it was a separate action. But subsequent to that decision and change into the charter language, I did an informal survey of entities that we typically compare ourselves to that are in like operations with electric utilities, airports, and the such, along with some neighboring entities as well. I actually came up with and reviewed the thresholds for City of Gainesville, City of Tallahassee, City of Palm Bay, Pinellas County, Pasco County, both who have, we actually have city staff in the city manager's office and the city attorney's office who have previous experience with those counties in their purchasing departments, City of Orlando, and of course, Polk County. And as City Attorney Davis had mentioned, with the exception of City of Tallahassee, who has a $25,000 limit, all the others maintain a $5,000 minimum threshold. And so we felt that was a comparable threshold to tie into.
And the purpose of my question really is because this allows for the greater the threshold, I would think it allows for greater local use in terms of the discretionary purchases, which would be generated more typically locally. So the only consideration I would raise as a question is not that it isn't conservative enough. I think it may be too conservative. If it were $10,000, is that an area where you believe, Ms. Rayford, from your standpoint, we ought to be involved in an RFP prescriptively anyway at that point? Or is there some benefit to having the discretion to be able to spend that money locally, which and is my assumption wrong that that money would likely land more locally if there was not an RFP prescription for it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that as far as the thresholds go and then allowing for local spend, I think that that the greater value that you would allow for local spend without competition, I don't think it would lend itself to a greater advantage for the local vendors. In increasing the spend to $5,000, we'll actually allow for not just local spend, whether it be in the local stores or the local economy, but also for greater P-card usage to allow for greater ability to buy the what is now considered smaller dollar purchases under the $5,000 limit. And also in consideration, our current formal bid threshold being $35,000. We just feel that the $5,000 makes it small enough to allow for greater use of non-competitive purchases, whether local or not, through P-cards or just through storefront purchases locally, but also far enough away that from that formal bid threshold of $35,000.
Other questions or comments? Thank you very much. All right, that takes us then to resolution, sir.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes, the only resolution that ties back into the equalization hearing of those lots cleaning and clearing assessments. The next item is the quarterly legal fee report. It is larger than normal. Hopefully this is not going to be a permanent trend. Part of that is the result of the Lakeland Park Connector project ramping up for trial. Fortunately, that settled, particularly with relation to the golf course there. That is a large portion of what that amount is. And another large item that I would like to talk with y'all about a little bit this morning is the charge of Ortel, Fernandez, Bryant, and Atkinson. They are our water use lawyers, and there is a lot going on at the water level currently in the state of Florida. The DEP is currently undergoing a rulemaking process that's called the Central Florida Water Initiative, or CFWI. And essentially what they're trying to do is reduce quite frankly, the water use permit capacities of various different jurisdictions. And really it seems to be that the goal is simply to, I might be overstating this, but the goal seems to be to force local jurisdictions into alternative water supply projects. With respect to Lakeland, with respect to all jurisdictions in the CFWI area, which includes Lakeland, what the proposed rule would do is reduce the city's water use permit to 2025 demand levels. And for the city of Lakeland, our 2025 demand level is approximately 25 million gallons per day. Our actual water use permit that we fought hard to acquire, and we back in I believe it's 2008 or 9, we went through an administrative litigation process and established that our draw of water was not having an impact on the wetlands or any other environmental impact, not an adverse impact. It's 35 million gallons per day. So the effect of this CFWI rulemaking process by the DEP, and SWIFT's involved as well as all the other water management districts, would be to reduce our water use permit from 35 million gallons per day to 25 million gallons per day. And in addition to that, would also require that the local jurisdictions actually first draw water from alternative water supply projects before using, and typically those would involve pumping water from the lower Florida aquifer, which is a lot harder to get at and therefore a lot more expensive water to use. So this rulemaking process would also force us to use a more expensive source of water prior to using our more readily available water that we currently have permits for. So it's once again, a lot of significant things going on. The alternative water supply project that we're involved in is through the Polk County, the Polk Regional Water Cooperative. They're looking at two different projects. The Southeast Wellfield project down, I believe that's east of Lake Wales, but we would nonetheless potentially participate in that. And then the West Polk Wellfield project, which I believe is actually on the side of our Williams Water Treatment Plant property. And those are expensive propositions as well. But the effect of this CFWI rulemaking process would be potentially to force our hand on these very expensive AWS projects. So I'm just prepping you that we're going to be spending a lot of money on our water use experts to follow this and to challenge it, because it's a 10 million gallon per day hit on our water use permit that once again we fought very hard for, and that's probably enough for me. Bill Anderson, Ruff and Gray, and Tom Adiachi are on the line, and they can provide more technical details for you.
That's an excellent recap. And before I weigh them in, the protection of this, first of all, it isn't mandated that there's a compliance in this. So that's a whole issue in and of itself into these new levels of regulations in which we participate. And secondly, if in fact this occurred, water rates for everyone would rise dramatically because the people who are going to pay for this are our citizens. Now, water over time is going to rise anyway. But these legal fees are extremely important because the expertise is so precise and the history with our city is so long that using them is an imperative. Mr. Anderson?
I really don't have much to add there. I think Mr. Mayor and Palmer, both of you provided really a good comprehensive recap of where we are. As Palmer said, we fought hard to achieve that permit, and what is somewhat baffling, the Water Management District, through Mr. Fernandez at this legal firm, just 6 months ago approved a 10-year extension to that 35 million gallon a day permit, taking us to 2038. And now, they're not just us, but looking to cut these permits. So again, very good recap. I think I really don't have anything to add to it.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would just add my sentiment to what you've already said, Mr. Mayor, and then what has been said already, because I can recall, coming onto the commission back during that time, dealing with the situation at best. And I know it's important for us to make sure we can continue to maintain where our supply level is. I would not want to see it dropped or reduced at all. In consideration of what I'm hearing, and of course you, Mr. Mayor, serving on that board or committee with the cooperatives, moving forward in that process, I would certainly say we need to do all we can to make sure that we have our ammunition prepared to be able to keep and maintain what we already currently are at.
And Mr. McLeod is my substitute, I would point out, so he's coming up to speed on this as well. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. And Bill, you may have a little bit more information. I know I had hoped when Sarasota and Manatee County had squeezed off that 258 million gallons down off the Peace River, we had got a little bit bigger piece of that. Of course, the negative component is they have all the salt water they can use to desalinate, whereas we're restricted to, I guess we can't even do stuff out of Lake Hunter or Lake Parker or Hancock and stuff because they want all the water coming down from Peace River. But I don't know if we could revisit that and try to get a little bigger piece of what we had allocated from that 258 million gallons.
Well, and we did, and that was, again, some of the fees we paid over the past year or so to this legal firm to help, and this was really more through the PRWC, securing some of that water here in Polk County that was going down the Peace River. And we did, again, working with the attorney, mediated that process and worked out where we did get a piece of that water, if you will, that resource that's going into the Peace River. So, we did get that. And that is one of the future possible projects with the PRWC, a source of water, if you will, for our citizens.
Mr. Gray, anything you'd like to add?
Looking at it, Palmer was saying that it's 10 million gallon a day drop, but it's actually 11.19. And looking at the 2025 numbers, we would basically be using up all of the groundwater we had allocated by then. And by front loading, we used the most expensive water first. And so we looked at the economic impact on people of lower income, and could be essentially doubling their water bill. And so they are at an economic disadvantage by something like this. And we want to try to protect them as well. So this is another aspect of what we're looking at.
Thank you. Any other questions by commissioners? So this is all predicated by the outside legal fees and expenses. And for those citizens who question this use when we have our own internal legal department, this is an example of expertise that we utilize that allows us to work and stay on the core fundamental legal issues that the city has with its own staff and send to an expert in an area the defense and work that needs to be done outside of that normal load. Correct, Mr. Davis?
That's correct. And this will also, you'll also see bills that will reflect various different experts that we're going to hire. We're going to have to hire hydrology experts. We're hiring an economist to address some of the economic impacts that Ruffin just alluded to. The different members of the Polk Regional Water Cooperative have different views on the different projects that are under consideration for that, but we're all united on the need to fight the CFWI rulemaking process. And so we are going to be able to, we're entering into a joint defense agreement with some of our other jurisdictions to share some of these costs. So that will help a little bit, but it's nonetheless going to be a tough battle.
And it's important for us to do so. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. And as you mentioned, being your alternate in this and getting up to speed over the past year, just a side note, Palmer and Bill, I'd love to set up a time just to brief on this. I know we've done that in the past, but I haven't been able to attend all of the cooperative meetings. So just to go through some of these issues with you one-on-one would be excellent.
Sure.
We will get that set up. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on that? All right, sir, the next item.
I believe Ramona's going to address the next item.
Yes, this is an agreement with Bentley Systems, Inc. This is a engineering software maintenance and support service. It includes licenses. This is a renewal of this agreement. It's for a 12-month period, and this particular software agreement or licenses are used across the board by various departments. It's used in the design of city assets, roads, electric, water, and wastewater utilities. The total expenses for this one-year agreement is $111,848.40. It's included in the Department of Technology's FY 2021 budget. If we were to go out and enter into a new agreement, it would probably substantially increase those costs. As you can see, that would be around $147,000. So this does represent a cost savings to the city to enter into an additional renewal period for the services.
Any questions by commissioners? All right, it looks like that flew well. Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick, for your availability. Next item.
Yes, the next item is something that I think most of you are familiar with. I don't think Commissioner McLeod was on the commission last time this came up, but there is a property on Lake Hollingsworth Drive, bordering on the lake, 1110 Lake Hollingsworth Drive. If you're familiar with the development on the lake, there's a little area sort of on the north and northwest side of the lake that has several houses on it. This property is immediately adjacent to the last house as you're going, counterclockwise around the lake. So this is currently an undeveloped property. The city originally owned this property and then sold it in 1945. And when it did, it included a deed restriction in the deed to that property that said that you can't build on the property other than a dock or a boathouse. And if you do, the property will revert back to the city. That happened in 1945, and there have been several owners since then. The current owner that owns the property back in, I believe it was late fall of last year, requested that the city remove that deed restriction from the property in order to allow development on the property. And the commission at the time voted to not do that. You can see from the memo that the current owner of the property bought the property in 2018 for $100. So that indicates that the market seems to indicate that the market does not view that property as buildable, and the property appraiser has the property valued at $100 as well. The reason why this is coming to you now is that some of you may be familiar with a statute, a state law called the Marketable Record Title Act, which tries to clear out title to properties by eliminating some old interest. However, it contains an exception to that allows people holding these interests to renew them from time to time. And the city did that back in November 21st of 1990, recorded a notice saying we intend to preserve our deed restriction on this property to prevent the property from being developed. This provision, this exception to the Marketable Record Title Act, MARTA, limits how long that preservation can occur to a period of 30 years. And then if you want to continue beyond that, you need to record a new notice in the public records. So that is what this item is all about, is we have until November 21st of this year to re-record that notice in order to continue that deed restriction on that property. I do indicate in the memo that there is also a land development code provision, which has been there for a while and actually repeats a previous regulation that was in the city code that prohibits building on these kinds of lakes, Lake Hollingsworth and Lake Morton and Hunter and some other lakes that have a road around them, that they prevent building in that kind of parkway area between the road and the lake. So that's been on the books for quite a while. So there is that. The two issues are somewhat different, though. The deed restriction is more of a property issue, and the land development code provision is more of a regulatory issue. And I raise that because that kind of affects what kind of legal challenge we might expect relating to this. You have I'd say broad discretion when it comes to the city as a holder of a property interest, which this deed restriction would be. With regard to the land development code regulation, although I think it's defendable as a regulation as opposed to a property interest, it's more susceptible to being challenged as a taking. So to have both of these things in place, both the deed restriction and the land development code provision, puts the city on a more solid, legally defensible ground than just one of them. So that is why we're recommending that you renew that deed restriction. If you do renew the deed restriction, just like the holder of any deed restriction, you have the discretion at any time to release that deed restriction and allow development. So this simply gives you the flexibility going forward, a little more control over the situation. So that's we're recommending that you authorize the recording of a new notice in the records that would potentially extend the effectiveness of the deed restriction for another 30 years.
Commissioner Madden, you're back, and yes, ma'am, your comment.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I do want to just bring up to my colleagues, when the landowner came to the commission, it was his understanding that the original 1945 deed restriction that was on the property he brought up was because of a drainage, some kind of a pipe. And, then in the 80s or 90s, the neighboring house, Bob Adams' house, along with all those other homes, were part of all the same neighborhood of lots that were all buildable, but his was not buildable because of this drainage pipe, in his opinion, and according to the lawyer that he brought with him. So he spent the money to remove the old drainage pipe that was not being used, and then thought once he gets rid of that impediment, that he would be able to build. That his did not fall under the rules, that we have without building on a lake, because his was a part of the same platting or subdivision, that Adams and everyone else who were building in the 90s after the 1945. And, not, however they did that, based on the land code of not there on a lake. So, he felt like, we were taking away any opportunity that he had to improve that property. And so for that reason, I won't be voting in favor of renewing the deed restriction. But I did just want to bring that up to my colleagues, that's not mentioned in this information, the removing of the pipe. And also this being not a separate, lot just somewhere else in the lake, but, he felt it was kind of a part of the same subdivision with, of these other properties that were able to build. And he felt the only reason that that land was unbuildable at the time was just because of this pipe that he has since removed.
I appreciate that input. Of course, that was his interpretation that the piping was the limitation and not the deed restriction. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Commissioner Madden, for that context, and I wasn't aware of that. But going back to the $100 purchase price of the property seems to indicate that it was understanding that it was not suitable to build on. I'm still stuck on that piece there. Certainly that a property there that if you could build on it would be much more than $100.
Any other commissioner comments? Well, I think that's Mr. Davis, any comment on that?
No, I think that's right. I think that reflects the market's assessment that that's not a buildable lot.
Any other comments by commissioners? Stephanie, we know you're having trouble dropping in and out, and we are empathizing with you. Okay, then let's go to the next item, sir.
All right, this is a meaty agenda. The next item is the city manager's employment agreement.
I did just want to say, I'm not a real estate expert. Probably Commissioner Reed would know this more than I. I know they for property. Hello? Can you hear me?
We can, but it dropped out just a little bit. Just stay right where you are and see if that works.
Okay, so basically, I'm not a real estate expert, but I do know that sometimes when people purchase property, they're able to say like a zero purchase price or put lower price than actually what they paid to give themselves, some privacy or discretion. I'm not sure if that happened here, but I might defer to Commissioner Reed or someone who does real estate to know if that is in fact true.
I can address that somewhat. For any real estate transaction, you have to pay documentary stamp tax on the deed, and it's based on how much you pay for the property. It's like 70 cents per. I'm going to get this wrong. I think 70 cents per $100 of value of the property, and there is a minimum documentary stamp tax fee of 70 cents, and that's when you don't pay for the property, you still have to pay 70 cents. And the deed for this property indicates that 70 cents of documentary stamp taxes were paid. So that indicates that no money was paid for the property. So, the deed will not necessarily say how much you paid for it, but the documentary stamp taxes, which are part of the recording information on the deed, do indicate how much was paid for. That's by law, you have to pay documentary stamp taxes based on what you paid for the property.
And Commissioner Madden, Commissioner Reed had to leave for an appointment that he could get, an eye appointment today that he could only get during this slot of time, and he apologizes for that, but he has left to get to that appointment, so he can't answer that question. All right, and before we go to the next item, Commissioner Madden, I want to regroup and go back if we can, because we know you had problems with accessibility, to see if you had any other comment on the spectrum item when we were there, or the attachment item.
Yes, thank you. So, and you might have covered it. Actually, thankfully, I have a negative report, so I'm COVID free. But I was at the doctor, so it was difficult to to be in with y'all, but I listened, to the entirety. And of course, the one thing I really wanted to talk about was the pole attachments, and that's when I couldn't hear anybody. So if this was already discussed, forgive me for, doubling up. But I did want to be fair to, we all know Chris Bailey, and he reached out to me. He was really concerned about having to pay double. Certainly they pay that $800,000 that we discussed, to be able to hang, their cables on our poles. And then Cindy gave the information about, 40 something thousand poles that they're attached to. And so they're not currently in, deploying 5G or interested in putting antennas on poles. Although, their business model is looking into Wi-Fi possibilities, possibly putting something mid-span on their cables. And so, I met with, our city attorney and with Cindy, and we reached out to different attorneys and cities, and Cindy and Palmer did such a great job of already articulating all of that, just to find out, here we need to have a current ruling, and we're late in the game on having a price established. Although Cindy did say now we're actually in the right price range because we waited and we're not having to revisit it because we have exorbitant fees. But rather than look at hypotheticals of how a cable company may or may not put a mid-span wire attachment on to give Wi-Fi, or which is what Chris Bailey said that they are looking into, to be able to give that kind of an offering in the future. And Palmer can correct me if I'm wrong, after speaking to Cindy and after speaking to, a lot of people, it looks to me that we're not going into hypotheticals here on what could or could not be hung on a wire. If we get to that point, then we would appreciate, Spectrum working with our engineers to see how that might affect our, loads and weights and wind, all of that, to make sure that our structural integrity of our poles is still intact and we have, everything appropriate for hurricane winds and everything. But for now, this particular ordinance is for the folks who do want to put antennas pole are not currently attached.
Mr. Madden, this particular ordinance, take it from there. Back up just a little because you started to break up.
And this is the pricing for that. So I feel like this should alleviate and allay, the fears of the cable companies. I've not spoken to Craig, but so is it me? Should I move closer somewhere? Is it getting any better? Y'all look frozen.
Guess it's better stop right there.
Any better?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that, and I will call Chris today just to be sure. He was wanting to table the issue and talk to his attorneys, just, feeling like he just didn't want to get into a position where he's double charged right now for the same, thing that he's been paying for, as a legacy provider of cable. And it sounds like I spoke to Cindy even as late as last night, to think that they are not going to be charged double because they're not putting any additional antennas on our poles presently. And to speak hypothetically to the future of what they might do to add things to their wires, we just don't feel like that this ordinance will, can't possibly, consider all the technological advancements or what they might potentially put in that wire. If they do want to put something on their wires to add Wi-Fi at that point, they'd have to talk to our engineers. Is that making sense to everyone? Sorry.
And it was very important for us to include your comments since you represent us so well on the electrical side as well as the broadband committee. So that's why I wanted to go back to that. We did ask her the question, is there a precedence for not charging if an additional item is hung? And it's just the opposite. The precedence is that they are charged if they add an item to the pole. And that is consistent across other utilities. And so that is certain, and Cindy's on. So Cindy, if you want to round that out just a second, because Commissioner Madden was off when we were having the discussion about double attachments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been hoping that she was going to get home and be able to share her insights. She and I've been working on this. And I mean, I was unclear as to what the concern was in regards to charter and the double billing, because I was understanding that the attachments were on the pole. And so that's what, when I addressed this topic, I'm like, yes, it's two separate things, which I had said earlier in the meeting today. But Stephanie, in her due diligence and meeting with Chris, he advised that they're actually clamped onto their cable. So we did research on what that should be, and I talked to an attorney with that works for the FCC in DC, and he advised that, you know, basically the concern for us is going to be it's not a fee concern. It's just, if you put it on there, we'd really like to know, because it could cause load impact to the poles that are supporting the cable, and we would just, our engineers would want to know. And so we just would like a heads up, like, hey, we're going to be putting this on our cable. Okay, great. Can we just have an engineering review before you guys clamp it on? And that's pretty much what the practice is right now. We also talked to CPS Energy, which is Muni out in San Antonio, Texas, and that's their process. I've talked to them. They're very advanced. They've been dealing with this forever. And they said, you know, as long as they talk to us about the engineering impacts, it's not an issue.
Commissioner Walker.
Let me make sure I got it clear, because I guess I got a little confused here now since Commissioner Madden shared those thoughts and sentiments that she did. Are we, as far as the ordinance is concerned that we'll be voting on, any additional attachment for wireless we're charging for? Is that correct?
That's
if
correct.
It's on the pole.
Excuse me?
If it's on the pole.
If it's on the pole. So in this regard, regarding, of course, in light of what Spectrum's concern is, it will not be a pole situation, if I hear you correct. It will be an attachment to what they already have.
Yes.
That we want to make sure, if you do it, Spectrum, consult our engineering personnel to make sure it's okay, and we agree to it.
You got
Am I saying correct?
Yes. Yes.
All right, so it won't be this double. It won't be a double kind of a fee for them, because it's not a pole attachment in this case.
Right. And the mayor has a great picture. It's a we don't have rights. The cable belongs to them. The pole belongs to us. So if it's on their cable, the only impact to us and the only purview we would have is, hey, make sure that our poles aren't impacted with additional weight. That's it.
Got you. Wanted to make sure I had it clear. Thank you.
Yeah, and Commissioner Walker, you're hitting on a really important topic about this. I always say to people when we start talking about this, there are so many rabbit holes when you start talking about this wireless attachment stuff, because there's so many different types. And the type that Charter and what Commissioner Madden have been talking about is called a mid-span attachment. And that is, again, like I said, a whole other animal, not what we're dealing with within this ordinance. This ordinance is specific to wireless attachments on our poles. Okay, so we're good. We're good.
Commissioner Madden.
Okay, perfect. So that addresses the legacy cable folks. And I think that they can really look at the pricing currently for their competitors who are getting into the 5G game, thinking that, you know, they are at a $20.70 rate on every pole, although, you know, the wireless won't need every pole. And that has not had any kind of accelerator. And, you know, in 2022, we will be able to discuss maybe a rate adjustment there, you know, but that's when we're scheduled to discuss that. So if you pivot to the telcos, and they're the ones who, you know, are on the quest to deploy the 5G and put the antennas on the poles, you know, there is, you know, of course they're going to try to get the best rates possible. You know, that's what they're in business to do. And then it's our side to make sure our poles are taken care of It doesn't affect our life cycle and our maintenance long term. So, I think that the nuances of, if they go somewhere that does not have a municipally owned electricity utility, then they pay $150. And that is what the state statute allows for, $150 if you don't have a public utility, electric utility. So because we have a municipally owned electric utility, our poles fall under a different requirement. We are exempt from that state statute, and so we really look a lot to the FCC, and so that's why City Attorney Davis and Cindy and have been doing so much research and really mention a lot the FCC versus the Florida state statute, because as a muni, we do have exemption. Now that could change at any time. They could advocate at the state level to change that, and we could find ourselves not exempt, and then we would be relegated to the $150 fee that the IOUs have to charge. So as a municipal electric utility, we have this opportunity, but under the FCC guidelines, we cannot go above that $270 threshold. And we have to be able to delineate, our the costs and why we came up with the price that we're charging, so that it's fair and equitable across the board for competition. Which it's kind of a joke that we've had any, but hopefully we're going to have lots of it, in the future. And so it's that $225 per utility pole and I think it's $205 per light pole. And that is kind of a discrepancy too. Like, how when we talk about we have fiber in the city of Lakeland has fiber. Well, it really is under, it's on LE's balance sheets. I mean, they own the fiber. It's similar to our light poles and our utility poles when it comes to who owns what. It's all City of Lakeland, but Lakeland Electric is the one who pays for those, maintains those, removes those. And so that's why, we get that FCC, exemption. So is that kind of clear, the difference between the cable companies who are already paying to attach wire lines to poles and the new coming, 5G wireless antennas that we'll be putting on our poles, and how we've had to just grapple with the impacts of one antenna versus 10 antennas versus the big refrigerator box on the bottom of the pole, and how much room it will take and how much weight it will bear and how it affects our wind loads. And so that's why we're so, it's taken us so long to get to this point to actually have a fee to charge the providers.
Excellent discussion on your part. Thank you. It's very informative for us. So appreciate you circling back. And in some cases, we'd have the need to replace a pole a desired unit might want to have to go on. That's our expense to do that. So if the engineers came back and said, this pole isn't strong enough, we need to put in, pull that pole. So that's all part of what is considered in this, because we have unanticipated expenses along the way. Engineering would obviously work to find optimal poles first. The charter's going to use the wire hanging devices first, but there might be some cases where there's too much load on a wire, in which case they have to go to a pole. In that case, they're going to pay to connects. And that's just an economic decision, and strength and capacity. Okay, complicated subject, as you both have well described. Thank you for your work on it and for amplifying it for us and for our citizens. And thank you as a crew for being willing to go back, and Mr. Shrest for your patience on what would be an important next item. All right, Mr. Davis, you're on.
All right. Since the selection of Sean as city manager, I've discussed and worked on his contract. What you have before you is essentially the same contract that Tony Delgado had with the city, with just a few items unique to Sean, and one would be the salary. In the case, the base salary is $196,000. As my memo indicates, the advertised salary range for the position was $196,000 to $215,000. So that's consistent with that range. He would get the same health, disability, and life insurance benefits as other city employees that are not a part of a collective bargaining unit. Vacation accrual of 20 days per year, vehicle allowance of $5,400 per year, which is the same as all the other department heads, city executives are currently receiving. Sean is currently a participant in Plan C of the city's pension plan. and is close to vesting in that. In the event that for whatever reason he is not able to do that, this contract, which is consistent with the law on the matter, and our pension plan would allow him to use his time in the military to buy additional months into the city plan in order to vest in the city plan. That's been done by other city employees, and that is permissible under our pension plan and general pension law. We've confirmed that with an outside pension attorney. As far as termination goes, the city charter allows you to terminate a city manager for cause. Interestingly enough, it does provide for a public hearing to do so if the city manager occupant requests that. So the contract reflects that procedure. If there's termination for other than cause, the contract provides for severance pay equal to 20 weeks of compensation, which is consistent with the state statute on that, and consistent with what was in Tony's contract. As far as the voluntary resignation goes, he would have to provide at least 30 days advance notice of that to the city. Contract allows outside employment only with the city commission's authorization, only if that would not cause a conflict or some other interference with the discharge of city duties. Contract requires that Sean live within the city limits, which he does. It has the same conduct clause that was in Tony's contract, and it's in my contract that requires that he conduct his public and private life in a manner that would always favorably reflect on the image of the city. I believe those are the primary points to raise. Once again, it's a very similar contract to what Tony had, and that's recommended for your approval.
So what this does is it would actually take these factors and plug them into the existing document that we have effectively for Tony's contract. I've gone over each of these items as well with our city manager-elect. And these are all things that he's willing to do. And that puts him in at the low range of what we advertised for with respect to this role. The only distinction in this that is slightly different is bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down, which is that military provision for being able to buy into severance because of the service if there was some unanticipated reason for an early departure, none of which any of us would expect. I think, Sean, you fully vest mid-September of next year. Isn't that correct in our pension plan?
Yes, sir, that's correct. It would be September the 12th.
So the probability of any of that even being necessary is slight, but to be as broadly conscientious as possible to make sure that he wouldn't risk a loss of that provision, that's what this is for. This wouldn't be included if it were for a cause. That's a whole different issue. But we anticipate great things, and everything else is consistent to what we have had in the past. Comments from commissioners on this? Any concerns at all? Or comments? All good? Nobody wants to suggest more money in this round, right? Right there, good. Hold together on that. Stand fast. We're so looking forward to it. Not to be facetious about that at all. We're so looking forward to the opportunity to move ahead and to see this in place. And by passing this on Monday, he will take away his -elect title and be city manager. And looking forward to the years ahead of vision and continuing questions of how we can improve that are inherent in who you are. And we're already seeing early results of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Palmer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do appreciate the favorable consideration from the commission on this item. And I have had quite a few emails come back to me telling me to change my signature block on my email address away from deputy city manager. But I've told everyone, because of my baseball past and having a little superstition still in me, that I wanted to wait until Monday and we get an official contract wrapped up. So I do thank you all. And again, I'm humbled and honored, and will do all I can to serve you and this commission and the city community to the best of my ability.
He has not even moved into the office, citizens. We want you to know that. He's just waiting until this is all final. And we have all the celebration things hanging on the wall, and he's still in his existing office. All right. Nothing else on that? Okay, then we'll move forward. We don't have a report from the finance director. We have 2 utility items, and of course, we'll have our utility meeting at 1 o'clock prior to our commission meeting. And so item 2, Ms. Sirianni.
Yes, this is a second amendment that we have with Caterpillar Financial Services. This is for our 992K wheel loader. This is used to move and unload coal out at Unit 3. Back in 2019, end of 2019, we did have one amendment to the agreement, and that was to increase the usage hours. This existing agreement is set to expire at the end, or actually November 20th. So the issue was whether we would look at doing a long-term lease agreement or extend this agreement by month to month, and it was determined by staff, given the nature of what we're dealing with Unit 3 and the potential decommissioning of that. The recommendation is to go to a month-to-month lease, so that would be effective beginning November 21st, and that would continue on a month-to-month basis with the ability to give staff to terminate that agreement with 15 days notice. The monthly rate is consistent with what we are currently paying, which is $45,182.37 a month. And for a year, if we anticipate having that contract in place for a year, the total amount would be $542,188.44. That amount is included in Lakeland Electric's FY21 fuel budget, and we'd ask for your favorable consideration for that agreement.
And I thought my rental car was expensive. Any questions or comments on this? All right, next up.
The next item we have is a change order with GE. This is for a bearing failure repair on Unit 3. The main boiler feed pump turbine low pressure bearing suffered a catastrophic event back in May. The failure caused contamination of the oil system and damage to other components with the main steam turbine generator and the boiler feed pump turbine. Due to the severe nature and the emergency circumstances that this presented, it needed to be repaired immediately. And in accordance with our emergency purchasing policy provisions, Lakeland staff contacted General Electric, which is the original equipment manufacturer. They presented an initial repair estimate of $1,798,147, which was approved by the city manager back in June 17, 2020. All the repair work was completed, and the unit was returned to service in August of this year. However, the initial repair estimate was a little bit lower. Once they got in and started doing the repairs, they found additional damage which needed to be taken care of. Therefore, before you, what we have is a change order for the difference in the total amount, which is $2,499,694.74 was the total amount of cost for the repairs. The change order we're asking for you to approve is an amount of $701,547.74. That was the additional damage estimate that was included in that work. And this amount is included in Lakeland Electric's FY21 budget as well.
Any questions on that? Glad it's in the budget. And of course, this is on Unit 3, which is a perfect example of why we have to be retiring Unit 3. And you hate spending this money, but you have to have it while we bridge to get there. But these are the kinds of repairs that are going to continue to pile up. And hopefully, you know, as expensive as this is a Band-Aid to keep rolling forward, and we have more of those expenses potentially possible. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor, for those comments. And just to add on to that, I mean, I think that's something that would be good to hear more about. Maybe it's in utility committee meeting on Monday, but just in terms of risk, how strongly positioned are we, between now and decommissioning Unit 3 to have something like this happen again? What's the risk of that? How prepared are we for that and those different types of scenarios? Because it's, for me, from where I'm sitting right now, it's easy to envision this another occurrence like this into the several $1 million. And I think people need to understand that scenario, what that looks like, and what that means for the future of Unit 3 and the timeline.
We'll make sure we bring that. I have them address that then at the utility committee meeting. But in conversations that I have had with our general manager, Mr. Ivy, it's a high concern, and it is unpredictable, and they don't know. So it's a matter of trying to keep it together. But you can have $8-10 million breaks in something that occur like this. And then when you get in and have it be more, just like this change order is, than you even anticipate. But let's have him bring that up if you can, Mr. Iriani, as a discussion point on the meeting Monday. I think that's a good point of inclusion.
We'll have that ready for you.
Commissioner, any other commissioner comments? All right. That is our last item. And so we can go to any other comments you'd like to make this morning. And then we will go to a 5-minute break after that, and then we'll start a workshop. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure you may be losing me around noon hour. I got something I need to take care of around noon hour. So hopefully, it's about 10:40 now. We'll be able to get this through the digital divide situation in the next hour or so, because I will have to leave. I got an appointment short after noon hour today.
I think we'll have it done in less than an hour. Really do. Okay, Commissioner Franklin.
Mayor, I have to leave at 11. I'm sorry. We were going to be done with all this before 11. So
yes, sir. We certainly understand your scenario, sir. And so, would you like to forego the break?
I could.
Commissioner Madden, did you have anything else? Kevin needs 5 minutes, right?
We have to switch all the AV over. We have to have a break.
Okay, sorry.
And Mr. Mayor, also the presentation PowerPoint that I'm going to provide is going to be pretty quick. So hopefully we can get quickly to the discussion amongst the commission, and it's going to be a tight timeline, but the presentation is not that intense as far as timing.
Let's meet at 10:45 and try and be done as quickly as possible. We are adjourned from this session.